For most, the first thing to come to mind when discussing snuff in the modern age are gore sites or shock sites. We've all visited or at least heard of such sites at some point in our lives, and for many of us, the curiosity they conjure up is just too much to resist. These sites allow you access to a laundry list of disturbing images and videos, with many of them provided in a neat, category-based manner. Suicides, autopsies, road accidents, gore sites have them all, but if you remember what we discussed in part 1, many still don't consider these to be genuine snuff films due to the fact that in these cases, the death wasn't carried out solely for the purposes of getting it on camera. Of course, while this is the bulk of material on gore sites, there are a few exceptions that stand out as far as we're concerned. Last time, we discussed a handful of serial killers predating the internet and how they went about documenting their crimes. It goes without saying that given advances in technology, doing this is easier than ever. And not only that, but sharing these grisly creations to an open audience of thousands or potentially millions is effortless. Perhaps the most infamous viral video depicting actual on-screen murder is One Lunatic, One Ice Pick, a video we've discussed on this channel on multiple occasions in the past. To many, the recorded and published murder carried out by Luca Magnotta in 2012 was the first real snuff film. Sure, many still argued against it, citing that Magnotta's motivation wasn't financially driven, but it was still actual murder actually caught on camera. A man, unfortunately, was snuffed out on screen, and Magnotta, unlike Anatoly Slivko, who we discussed last time, wasn't interested in hiding it. What a lot of people seem to forget, however, is that Luca most definitely was not the first to scar the internet with such a video. Ask any frequent internet user what the worst video online is. Many will say One Lunatic, One Ice Pick, while the other half will most likely bring up an older video known as 3 Guys, 1 Hammer or 3 Guys, 1 Screwdriver. In 2007, a pair of teenage Ukrainian serial killers and a single accomplice dubbed the Hammer Maniacs took the lives of 21 innocent people, all of which were picked off the streets at random before being bludgeoned to death. Once the boys' killing spree came to an end, police uncovered multiple recordings of the crimes on the suspects' phones and computers, one of which would eventually be leaked. If you somehow managed to avoid this video for the decade it's been online, it is as bad as it sounds. The victim was a 48-year-old grandfather who was recently forced into retirement due to poor health. On the day of his death, he was making his way over to visit his grandchild, but needless to say, he never made it. In the video, the victim can be seen on the ground, already unable to defend himself as one of the 3 boys begins to violently strike his face with a hammer. As the man clings on to life, he's then jabbed in both the face and stomach with a screwdriver before finally being hit once again with the hammer, finally ending his suffering. This is, of course, what eventually led to the video's infamous online moniker. While there really hasn't been that great of an established motive behind the seemingly random murders, it's widely believed that the Hammer Maniacs plan to create up to 40 videos depicting on-screen murder for the purposes of profit. One of the boys' ex-girlfriends had made this claim, which was later backed up by a classmate who recalls the boys talking about having connections with what they referred to as a rich foreign website operator who would pay them handsomely for the films. This, of course, was never ultimately confirmed, but it does raise questions and leads us right into our next topic. We fear what we don't understand. As cliché as it sounds, it's absolutely true and can even apply to tools and resources we use every single day. I am, of course, referring to the internet. These days, pretty much everyone is online throughout the majority of the day in one form or another, whether it be for social media, research, entertainment, or anything else. But despite how much we use the internet, it's safe to say that the general public remains mostly ignorant about elements of it in which they don't see or use on a daily basis. If you spend any time online, then you'll most likely be familiar with the growing fascination and fear of society's latest boogeyman, the deep or dark web. If you remember part 1, then you may recall that the myth of snuff was started after the Manson murders took place, leading to the media using the concept as a gimmick. In this case, it seems the public's interest in the deep web became a widespread phenomenon following the highly publicized shutdown of Silk Road, an online black market mostly known for the selling of illegal drugs. Although the deep and dark webs are technically different, many mistakenly use the terms interchangeably, and as a result, the so-called deep web has become a new staple in the online horror genre, and at this point it seems almost impossible to find at least one horror-themed YouTube channel that hasn't covered this concept at least once. This is, of course, exactly the same way it played out with the spread of snuff in popular culture in the latter half of the 20th century. And with all this different noise coming from all directions, it can be oftentimes difficult to differentiate fact from fantasy and, in some cases, sensationalism. Perhaps the most unnerving rumor to spawn from the deep web hysteria is the existence of red rooms, the modern-day equivalent of the snuff legend, this time centering around deep web live streams rather than recorded media. Of course, online users debate endlessly over whether or not these streams do exist, and just like snuff, a number of red room hoaxes have popped up. In late 2015, rumors began floating around about an ominous webpage that many believed would later stream on-screen murder or torture. The site, only known as Alicia, featured nothing but a countdown timer and a single line of text, along with some indistinct audio playing in the background. This obviously piqued the public's curiosity, leaving online users tuning in to see what exactly was going to happen once that timer hit 0. They were, however, left disappointed. Those who witnessed the event claimed that once the time was up, a live stream did start, but only featured a blank screen and the same muffled audio from before. Others claimed that this wasn't actually a live stream and simply embedded audio. Of course, there really wasn't any reason for anyone to believe that Alicia would have been a red room. Alicia, after all, never did outwardly advertise itself as one, but there is another site that did. Around the same time the Alicia incident happened, another site with the tagline ISIS Red Room, Free, Brutal, and Live had surfaced. It too came with a countdown timer, along with a description of what it intended to do once the stream began. The site claimed to have captured several members of ISIS that they were planning on torturing and killing live via their site, all with the option for viewers to request literally anything they wanted inflicted on them. Of course, this didn't seem all that unbelievable. After all, we all know how often ISIS releases execution footage, so what exactly is stopping them, or in this case, their enemies, from live streaming such an event? Technical limits aside, this seemed like something that was just bound to happen at some point. Fortunately or unfortunately, depending on your stance on this thing, the ISIS Red Room turned out to be a hoax, or perhaps more appropriately, a practical joke. Just before the stream was set to go live, the site crashed, only to reappear shortly after with text thanking people for participating. It seemed that whoever was responsible decided to cop out. However, a video claiming to be the ISIS Red Room footage soon surfaced, but left people equally disappointed. The video lasts over 20 minutes long, and features a single man sitting in a corner with a bag over his head. Another man occasionally appears on screen, throwing raw bacon at the alleged prisoner, then setting down various weapons. Eventually, after several minutes, the so-called executioner picks up a hammer, and right as you think you're going to see an execution, the video begins to lag, and jump cuts to the prisoner, now with blood on the sack covering his head. This is pretty much where the video ends. While on the topic of the dark web and on-screen atrocities, it's impossible not to bring up Peter Scully and Daisy's destruction. Before we begin, I just want to point out that this is a fairly new and ongoing case, and if you read reports surrounding the situation, you'll notice that there is a ton of conflicting information, so much so that it seems the public only really knows half the story. Ask anyone, and they'll most likely explain to you that Peter Scully was an Australian man who in 2015 was arrested after it was realized he was running an international child pornography ring from the Philippines that specialized in child snuff films and red rooms of the same nature. Again, this really is only partial truth, so I urge you to cross-check facts whenever this case comes up. The most notorious of his many films is a video that's come to be known as Daisy's Destruction. Since Scully was responsible for terrorizing multiple victims, the contents of Daisy's Destruction is highly disputed. Many claim that the video is in fact an actual snuff film depicting the rape, torture, and eventual murder of a young girl, when in actuality, the girl in the video survived and was rescued. People seem to be confusing the girl known as Daisy with another one of Scully's victims whose remains were uncovered beneath his home. Some reports claim that he killed her accidentally, whereas others claim that he did so in cold blood. Some articles also claim that this girl was murdered on camera in a different lesser-known video, while others claim her torture had been recorded, but her death happened off-screen. Again, it seems that no two people tell the story the same way, aside from a few key factors, while the details are left muddied. A few online articles even claim that Scully exclusively operated red rooms, where all of his victims were murdered live for paying spectators. As I said, only one body was ever found, and the rest of his victims were rescued, so there really isn't any fact at all to support this claim, and it does seem that the Red Room aspect of the story was added through telephone versions of the tale passed down from person to person. Based off everything we've discussed here, it's become painfully obvious that we humans tend to sensationalize stories that interest us, giving way to waves of misinformation that makes the truth even more difficult to obtain than it already is. No matter what label you choose to slap on the cases we discussed over the course of this video, the main point is that they still happened. Daisy's destruction may not be an actual snuff film, but that doesn't make it any less horrific. There may not be any red rooms in the way that we know them in internet folklore, but we all know that gruesome events have been broadcasted live via platforms like Periscope and Facebook. Snuff films in their traditional definition may still be considered urban legend, but we know that we can see a real person snuffed out on camera at any time we desire. Because of the internet and other ever-evolving technology, it's safe to say that this is unfortunately the very tip of the iceberg, as these cases aren't the only examples that apply here, nor will they be the last. Thank you so much for watching, and if you have any other topics you'd like to hear discussed in this series, go ahead and drop a comment or reach out on social media. And with that being said, I'll see you all in the next one.